it is my pleasure to introduce our panel of speakers. First of all, we've got our moderator, Graham Barrow, influencer, lecturer, and director of the Dark Money Files. We have Jean Villedieu with Linkurious, the co-founder of Linkurious, and Miguel Aguado, operational compliance officer for RIA Money Transfer. Thank you guys for being with us this morning.
Thank
Graham,
you.
I'm going to hand it over to you.
Casey, thank you so much, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to this round table. Just a couple of quick bits. I'm here in the UK, Jean is in France, Miguel is in Spain, so if we had little gaps between some of our questions and answers, it is because the technology is catching up with us. I'm delighted to be on Moderator. I'm going to give you a little bit of background information about me in a minute, but Jean, Miguel, I'm going to ask you just a very quick background to yourselves first. Jean, just a very quick profile of who you are and why you're here.
Cool. So my name is Jean. I'm a co-founder of Linkurious. Linkurious is a company that specializes in graph analytics, and we provide a software that is used by teams of investigators throughout the world to fight back against financial crime.
Thank you, Jean. And Miguel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Miguel Aguado. I'm the operational compliance officer in RIA Money Transfer. I have worked in different payment institutions over the last years, always in compliance roles like PayPal, MoneyGram, and for the last 8 years in RIA Money Transfer. I have worked in different jurisdictions, Malaysia, Ireland, and Spain in Europe. Thank you very much.
Miguel, thank you. And just to finish that off, my name is Graham Barrow. As you can see from my background, I am one half of a podcast called The Dark Money Files. For the last 2.5 years, over 82 episodes, we have talked all about financial crime and money laundering. And I have a kind of day job, which is I work with global banks to help them to keep it out of the system. So let's get going. Miguel, I'm going to start with asking a question for you. In your experience, Miguel, have you encountered an increase in complexity or the levels of complexity of criminal activity over the years in which you've been doing the job that you do?
Yeah, indeed. Irrendably, this is like the never-ending game of the cat and mouse. The mechanism of increasing the complexity is quite simple. A new pattern appears in the market, then the industry becomes able to identify such pattern and then establish the mitigating actions to prevent this pattern to happen in the product and service they are offering. So when these new mitigating actions become like a standard in the industry, is the time when the criminals try to find another way to continue with the criminal activities. So the circle start again with a new pattern. So this is like a never-ending story. To give you just an example of how the complexity is increasing in a very simple product like wire transfer or money transfer, imagine in lack of controls, guys can send advance money and the ways for the criminal activities, there is no control. So then we start setting very basic controls, maybe like a transaction limit. So you establish a transaction limit, but the bad guys will learn how to split transactions or the amounts in several transactions just to avoid the limits. So then you need to become a bit more complex, creating aggregation limits. Once we have the aggregation limits, the pattern become even more complex. So it start to appear more elaborated structuring activities like one-to-many, many-to-one, and eventually the many-to-many. The many-to-many is one of the most difficult patterns to identify because we have a group of senders working in coordination, but without strong links, sending to a group of beneficiaries with the same characteristics. So the challenge is to find these weak links that still allow us to identify the pattern. So the methodology or the technology of linkage analysis, neural networks will help a lot to identify these links, to follow the pattern and be able then to create mitigating actions.
That's fascinating. And it seems to me what you're describing is a problem of scale here, Miguel. It is, as it gets more sophisticated, the scales involved increase. Jean, anything you'd like to add to that?
Sure. So I think Miguel has mentioned, his perspective, which is coming from the money services business. What I'd like to stress is that we are sort of seeing the same trends, the same sort of a rise in terms of complexity in other sectors, such as banking, insurance, also for tax authorities. They are all dealing with actors that are more and more sophisticated. Just to give you a bit of an example of that, for example, a few years ago, we saw that a group of criminals from North Korea almost pulled off a $1 billion raid on the central bank of Bangladesh. It's a very different scale in terms of complexity, in terms of results also that is existing today. And I think it's it's not just lone geniuses in some part of the world. There's no real industry with people who come up with schemes, other people who provide the technology, other people who are sort of the manual employees who are taking care of small transfers or small operations. So it's really complete industry that financial institutions are fighting when it comes to compliance and fraud. And I think it's important, to really have that in mind when thinking about what sort of controls to put in place to defend an institution.
Yeah, it's a fascinating example, the North Korean heist. I must stress I have no vested interest in saying this, but the BBC have done a really, really excellent 7-part podcast called The Lazarus Heist, available, I think, anywhere in the world. It's a fantastic explanation of what happened in North Korea and the complexity that you talk about. Thank you. Jean, let's turn our attention then to monitoring programs. So what do you think has been one of the main challenges that stopped financial institutions from working both efficiently and effectively when they're trying to identify this criminal activity that's moving through the financial system?
Sure. I think what Miguel mentioned it really resonates with me. This sort of use of thresholds, simple analytics to detect suspicious activities. I think it creates a false sense of security. You do generate some alerts, you do catch some bad guys, but ultimately this is going to leave you wide open to the smart criminals. The smart criminals, they're going to be able to bypass that, and you're only going to end up with fraudsters, with money launderers that are going to be able to operate far too long and cause way too much damage. And you also end up with tons of false positives, with anti-fraud teams, with compliance teams that are basically chasing their tails, fighting to close meaningless alerts. And I think it creates a world culture which is not really conducive to an effective fight against financial crime.
Yeah, you could get quite depressed listening to that. Miguel, anything you'd like to add to that? And how hard is it for you to keep tabs on emerging typologies, so new methodologies, as we try and address the existing ones?
Yeah, when we are facing new trends, new methodologies, our first challenge is to identify this pattern, and the second is to mitigate. And there is challenges associated to the both sides. When we are talking about identifying, first we need to have an early detection, because the time is going by, and you should not delay the detection of the unusual activity, because the harm that this may causing is increasing exponentially. And the second is, when you identify this pattern, you need to be able to gather as much information as possible, because this is going to allow you to effectively go to the second part. This is the mitigation. And the mitigation need to be surgical. So it's very important that you are not applying like a blanket approach, because in a blanket approach, obviously, you are going to cover the risk, but you are going to affect the business in the way that you don't wish to destroy legitimate business. So we need to be you need to create tailor-made measures to mitigate the risk without impacting in the legitimate business. And this is the biggest challenge. So only by obtaining real quality data about the pattern, very in detail, in deep, how they are performing, then is when you can really mitigate in a surgical way.
Okay, so and obviously, you know, we live in a world now where new technologies are gaining a strong foothold and are becoming part of our everyday language. We talk about AI and machine learning and deep learning. So Jean, if I can turn to you, where are we going with new technologies? So how is that? Is it going to make a big difference? And if so, how?
For example, we at Linkurious we are applying an approach which is called graph analytics. So it consists of looking at data as a set of nodes and relationships. So this is an approach that has been pioneered by the likes of Google and Facebook, and we see a tremendous value in that. And just to give you a very concrete example, a few years ago we were able to partner with an organization called the ICIJ that ended up, investigating the biggest data leak in history, called the Panama Papers. And this, small group of journalists who were, frankly, outsiders with no hands-on experience in the financial industry, were able to use graph analytics to uncover in emails, bank records, suspicious transactions, and ultimately expose a few money launderers, some tax evaders, but also a lot of criminal networks. And they were able to accomplish that with very limited resources and with the use of this new approach. And what's exciting for me as a company founder is really to see how other teams now are able to apply that. So, for example, we are working with Zurich Insurance, among other companies, and these folks are tasked with looking at suspicious claims. And that process, for them, it involves looking not just at the claims, but also internal data, external data, a bunch of databases about non-fraudsters, in order to ultimately make a decision about a claim. And they were really, struggling with that. And by incorporating graph analytics into their process, they are now able to, for each claim, look at the broader picture, everything that is related to that across these different data sources, to then make a decision. What they have experienced is a decrease in 30% in terms of the time that they take to process the various claims. But they're also, experiencing that they're making better decisions. So that's one example of the impact that technology can have.
Okay, so I think we've got a couple of poll questions. It's a good opportunity to put them. We're going to put the first one, which is just generally about new technologies. So Casey, if I can ask you to put the first poll question up. We're just interested in people's responses to this. So thank you.
Coming up now.
Brilliant. Thank you, Casey. So just generally, do you think these new technologies, guys, are going to make a tangible difference in the fight against financial crime?
So in my opinion, when the financial crime becomes very sophisticated, the traditional technologies become inefficient, in the sense that it's very time consuming and you need a very high level of expertise by your analyst to be able to achieve the expected results. But when you introduce new technologies into the analysis workflow, you can get a faster results with more complete information and much more efficient process. So at some point you should be able to identify, to go beyond, to identify new patterns or new sides or angles of the patterns that you didn't see with the traditional maybe tables or power tables, pivot tables, or this kind of traditional technologies.
True. So thank you, Miguel. So Casey, have we got a response for that first one?
We have 150 responses, about 65% of the total participants. You want me to end it and put up the results?
Please. That would be lovely.
All right. Let's see here. Let's get these results on screen, and looks like I'm sure you would guess that would be the answer, huh?
Well, that's it's brilliant because I mean you can see from my grey hair, I grew up in a world where computers hadn't been even dreamed of. So it's fantastic that people are really seeing the potential of new technologies. Now we have a slightly more focused question, which I'd like to follow up with, which is around graph technologies. I'm so excited by graph technologies. I have the great pleasure of working with companies like Linkurious and others who are using these because we think visually. And the brilliant thing about graph technologies is they display information the way that we think. And I find that hugely helpful. So Casey, if I could just ask you to put that second poll question up.
All right, coming up now.
Thank you so much. So just the question is, in your organizations, have...
Technology for financial crime.
So sorry, could you say that again?
Yes, of course.
I didn't catch that question.
Yeah, you're cutting out, Maria. Maybe you want to put your question in the chat box.
And it may be, let me just second guess that, about people understanding what we mean by graph technology. So graph technology is where you take data, but you represent it in a graphical format. So anyone who's ever accessed, in fact, the Panama Papers, the ICIJ website, will have seen that they're called nodes and connections, but they're basically how you can see networks connect to each other through these connectors. And it's a fantastic way of taking what is, effectively empirical data, but expressing it in a visual format. So interesting to know how many organizations that we've got here have already seen graph technology, and are they using it? Are they leveraging it in their approach to their anti-financial crime control? So away you go, people. Let's see where graphs are in all of this.
We're at 56% have answered the poll question.
Brilliant.
All right, so you want me to go ahead and close it out and put it up?
Yes, please. And I'm going to hand back to Jean once we see the outcome and ask for Jean's immediate reaction to that. So,
all right, should be coming up on the screen now.
Got it. Thank you so much, Jean.
That's, very interesting for me. So we see that there are already some organizations out there that are, leveraging graph analytics, and that's, is something that we are also seeing because we are helping some of those organizations, and other companies are also doing that. But there's almost half of the audience, I guess, that is not currently leveraging graph analytics. And to me, it's very, very interesting in the sense that this is an area where for these organizations, there's ways where they can improve their methodology in terms of anti-financial crime. So very, very interesting, I guess.
And so one of the things that I know is that many of our intelligence services across the world do use graph technologies to huge effect. I've had the pleasure of working with one or two, and I know how deeply they are into using graph technologies. So that brings me on to my next question. So Miguel, I'm going to throw this at you first. This relationship between the private sector and the public sector and law enforcement particularly is critical to the success of our fight against in financial crime. In your experience, Miguel, how well does that relationship work? How much feedback do you get? How much does that help to inform your daily life?
Yeah, well, obviously the law enforcement and regulators are setting the standard of the industry by the regulations, by the audits, and by the recommendations that are making. So the role is very important to, at some point, to standardize the market. In my company that we operate in more than 150 countries, we operate in different jurisdictions, but we have the opportunity to talk with many different regulators and financial intelligence units. And we have seen different levels of the use of technology by them. Obviously, the most advanced are showing us what is the way, and actually we have followed some of this, because you should not stay behind as a regulator. You should see at least the same as they are seeing to meet their expectations. But in others, we see that there are some maybe running a bit behind, And we have also, in our relationship with them, helped them to implement and to share our experience in such technologies so they can take advantage of us. To give you a quick example, a couple of years ago, we were preparing a project for the European Commission. We have the participation of Europol and some law enforcement agencies in Europe, just to standardize a technology that we use graph to standardize the subpoenas investigation when they were related to terrorist financing or terrorism activities. And it was very interesting process when the objective was to standardize the technology in the fight against the terrorism.
That's really, that's fascinating, actually, Miguel. Thank you. I want to pick up on, Jean, if I may. There's a theme that's emerging from our viewers and listeners, and I'd like to pick up on that because lots of them have made the point that, of course, this technology isn't just available to financial institutions and to law enforcement, it's available to the criminals as well. And people are making the point that they tend to move much quicker, they're much more agile, they're much more inventive. How much of that have you seen? I know that you also work with various organizations. How much of that is in the thinking of those organizations who have access to this technology, that the bad guys have got it and they are very agile in how they use it?
I think for sure, the technology, that's one big part of meeting the challenge of financial criminals, but the agility in terms of being able to adapt quickly to new emerging schemes, and that's really what Miguel was mentioning. That's definitely key. And we see that the best organizations out there when it comes to fighting financial crime really try to have that agility and to have the shortest possible loop between seeing a new pattern emerge and then being able to actually have the tools, the processes that are ready to that.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that we're seeing a model developing. It's here in the UK and elsewhere where you have these, we have a thing called GIMLET, which is a joint money laundering intelligence task force between the government and private sector in order to share intelligence and understanding to adapt very quickly. Casey, if I can ask you, we have a third poll question which relates specifically to that, which is to see how our audience feel about how that relationship between public and private sector is working. And I can see already people on this call come from both. So do those people watching, do you think we do need a closer working relationship between public and private sector? Do we need to be more agile, share information and intelligence, quickly and easily so that we can try and keep up with the criminals? See, I think it is such a great question, because one of the perceptions I have is that at the moment we are a bit disjointed. We don't always join our dots up in nice graphs the way that the criminals do across the world. So very interested to see the outcome of this, and I'm sure Jean and Miguel are too.
Graham, this is Constantine from Zurich, Switzerland. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Constantine. Hi.
While you were saying that, what always goes through my mind, and we always have these discussions, is about making the business case for compliance or being compliant in business under one roof. And against that background, you were mentioning about this kind of collaboration between the private and public sector. However, what is always standing in the way here is the data privacy laws. Here in Switzerland, it's almost mission impossible even to get the most simplest and minimal kind of collaboration. They put you on the formal path and you end up saying, okay, why the heck bother? It's too much money, too much time, and too much effort to kind of get people for a short time window on the same page. What is your view on that, or your experience to the experts on this panel? Thank you.
You're very welcome. I'll of course hand over to Jean Miguel. So there is this really emerging technology called homomorphic encryption, which is this ability to share well-protected private information in a way that is analyzable and interrogatable. And I think we are developing technologies, Constantine, which are going to allow us to do those consultations without necessarily exposing specific personally identifiable information. Jean Miguel, I'll happily hand over to you, and also to take your views on that. Jean.
Sure. In my opinion, the compliance it really feels sometimes like a zero-sum game when all institutions are sort of trying to have that fight with money launderers, and I see a lot of public pressure, in terms of rising expectations about what's the role of financial institutions when it comes to fighting money laundering. And I would expect that, as that pressure builds up, there will be, more and more partnerships between banks and the public sector to pull together some of their data and also resources to be more effective to fight against financial crime. Because for sure, it's frustrating to see, this fight is really siloed between different organizations.
Yeah. Thank you, Miguel. Anything to add to that?
Well, it's true that it's very challenging, but the collaboration already exists. It's true that we can go one step forward in this collaboration, and the data protection regulations are always it's a challenge to manage this sharing of information. But many times in these data protection acts, there is a provision when there is an interest in terms of protecting against crime, money laundering, terrorist financing. So it should be covered. It should be covered to allow the law enforcement and the private sector to collaborate, because the gain should be above all this law enforcement. But they need to be considered, absolutely.
Thank you. I see we're just about to run out of time, sadly, because I feel we've just started a conversation rather than finishing one, but that's okay. It's a good conversation to start. So I'm just going to say thank you so much to Jean and Miguel. It's been a wonderful and fascinating conversation. Thank you so much to everybody who's tuned in. We really value your participation and your questions, and I really hope it's a conversation that we can keep going. So Casey, back to you.